Building your resume. I view the resume as your greatest opportunity to share with a law school how you've spent your time. I believe this is the most underrated and overlooked aspect of the application process for most applicants. Although applications may have you fill in basic information about your jobs and activities, there's no room to explain things. If you do a great job on your resume, by showing the law schools how you've spent your time and what you've accomplished, it frees up your personal statement to cover things that are more interesting and thoughtful about you. It's one thing to list a title of vice president of your fraternity. It takes it up a notch to explain that it was VP of Standards and Risk Management and that you had to handle the forced resignation of a fellow officer over some indiscretion, or that as treasurer you oversaw bringing the chapter out of debt and into a $10,000 surplus, and that you spent over 100 hours leading a committee to redraft the organization's bylaws. Likewise, instead of just saying you worked as a manicurist for 3 years, you can add that you worked 25 hours a week to fund your education. This is the chance to add details of how you've spent your time. The resume, if properly executed, is what makes you a living, breathing, hardworking individual with interests and pursuits. This is not only your chance to show leadership, but to share the extent to which you self-financed your education, describe your cultural or volunteer activities, language proficiencies, athletic talents, experience living in another country, how much you worked during college, and what your job as an office manager or sales associate really entailed, and what you accomplished in each role. Basic rules of resume writing. Number 1, avoid referring to yourself in the first person. Number 2, use action words at the beginning of your descriptions. Number 3, use past tense to describe things you did in the past, and present tense to describe current duties. 4, it's okay to go on to a second page if you're doing it because of the substance that needs to be included and not because of the design or template you're using. 5, do not include high school. Your high school honors, athletics, and awards got you into college. Now you need to stand on your accomplishments post-high school. I know you might be thinking, well, that rule doesn't apply to me because I was high school valedictorian, an Eagle Scout, captain of the football team, or won an award for community service. But to consider yourself special in this regard is a mistake. Emphasizing high school often unwittingly highlights youth. She was in high school 3 years ago? Immaturity. She thinks this is important. Lackluster college performance. She didn't do well when she moved out from under the watchful eye of mommy and daddy. And privilege. She went to that high school. Perhaps I sound a little cruel, but it's absolutely necessary to help you create an effective resume. Since you are an aspiring lawyer, you should know that every rule has an exception. Even I have made exceptions for clients whose high school accomplishments add context to their later achievements. For example, playing as a member of a professional symphony at age 16, Olympic-level competitive figure skating, moving to the U.S. while in high school and learning English as a second language and still graduating from high school with honors. If you attended a fancy preparatory school on full scholarship and your socioeconomic circumstances would have otherwise prevented your attendance. International students who attended boarding school in the U.S. or in another English-speaking country may add this to their resumes to demonstrate experience studying in English. How should you organize your resume? Generally, the section headings for your resume will include these main headers, or at least these that apply to you. Everyone should have an education section, professional experience, employment, activities, skills, and accomplishments. Be creative about the way you group different endeavors together. For example, I had a client this year with 2 separate passions and a lot of relevant experience in each. One was as a leader in the social action arm of a religious organization, and the other was as an advocate on issues relating to sexual assaults on campus. Rather than combining all of her experiences, we created separate headers, one for gender advocacy and one for Jewish community service. This way, her activities looked more focused, rather than sticking to a chronological listing would have made her interests appear scattered. The education section. Law schools are primarily concerned with your education, so lead with it. You should include all of your degree institutions and certificates, but you do not need to include every school you ever attended if you only attended for a summer, for example. You may include study abroad under this heading as well. The education section should include, in reverse chronological order, the schools you've attended since high school graduation. Only in those rare circumstances I mentioned earlier should you include high school. One example of when it's acceptable to do so was for my client who was applying to the University of Texas, and she was trying to show ties to Texas that would not have otherwise been evident from aspects of her background since she attended college in New York City. In the education section, include the following information: the proper name of your degree, the date it was conferred or is anticipated to be conferred, the formal name of your university, the city and state of its location, your major and minor information, and your GPA if over a 3.0. You should also include honors, including graduation honors such as magna cum laude, your thesis title, the number of semesters you are on Dean's List, honor society memberships, scholarships and awards received, and include descriptions of these if they're not self-explanatory. Professional experience. Include any jobs you've held since college or before or during college if they were in line with an area of work you pursued, such as military experience, human resources, journalism, laboratory research, or teaching. If you've dabbled in a few fields, call this section professional experience. But if you have one main area, you can give it a specific title like laboratory research experience, military experience. And then you can have a separate header for other employment, such as college jobs or summer jobs that don't fit into that category. Or you can have one section for teaching experience and another for real estate experience if you've had more than one career. Employment section. List every job you've held since high school graduation. If it's been 20 years, you can leave some out, but for most applicants, you will want to account for your time, even if it's not something you think law schools will find impressive, and even if it doesn't seem to be law-related. You can choose to separate out post-college and during college employment through the use of headers, for example, experience, and then college employment, or any variation that you feel fits your experiences. This really should include all jobs because you're trying to account for your time. There's no shame in showing a law school you're not above a little grunt work. These jobs add context to your grades and other achievements, even helping to explain why you had a hard time with grades during a semester when you had to work full-time. It demonstrates time management skills. It shows you weren't a recluse and that you had to deal with other people in a stressful or fast-paced environment. Unglamorous or menial jobs build character and demonstrate a lack of elitism. Exceptions to the all jobs rule are rare, but here are a few. If you made a living as a professional gambler, you might have second thoughts about sharing it. However, it can add character and an interesting aspect to your application. One of my clients who shared this story is graduating at the top of his class from Harvard Law School right now. Job hopping. Jobs you held for a month probably shouldn't be listed by themselves. Instead, you could group together a number of temporary jobs and say something in the personal section, like between March and August 2014 worked temporary jobs as an office administrator for various dental offices in the Detroit area. When describing each job, try to include something specific. Instead of sold and marketed homes, try assisted in the sale of 4 homes, resulting in more than $3 million in sales. Avoid generalities like learned valuable business skills, and especially those that sound like you're writing yourself a letter of recommendation. Avoid embellishing your experiences. Everyone knows what a legal assistant does, and it sounds disingenuous to write that you were drafting motions to dismiss and handling major trials single-handedly. However, if you were promoted to senior paralegal and training other paralegals, you should share that. If you were promoted after only 3 months, include that too. If you took over the duties of the senior paralegal when he was out on family leave, that can be included. Just be careful about overstating your duties. It will set off alarm bells for admission officers and bring the credibility of the rest of your application materials into question. For each job, think about including the following information: your job title, name of your employer, the city and state of employment, and the dates of employment. Depending on the job, include 1 to 5 bullets describing accomplishments and duties. Quantify your success when applicable. Explain the purpose or focus of the organization or company if it's not going to be obvious to the reader. Start each bullet with an action word, for example, coordinated, led, devised, arranged, planned. Avoid use of first person in the descriptions. Include the number of hours you worked per week or indicate full-time employment, especially for jobs held during the school year. As you're writing descriptions, consider whether the assessment would be better made by someone else, perhaps in a letter of rec, because it might sound arrogant for you to proclaim about yourself. For example, exercised brilliant decision-making skills. If you worked in a family business, own up to that, because first, it'll make more sense if it's not something in line with your interests, and second, it shows that you were probably handling a greater level of responsibility. Typically, in a family business, so much is personally at stake, and one is naturally trusted with more oversight. Activities. You should list each activity in reverse chronological order and include your role in the organization, the extent of your involvement, dates of involvement, and any particular accomplishments. This section should include college and post-college extracurricular activities and a description of the extent of your involvement in each. I believe, as you know, that high school activities should not be on a resume for law school because the idea is that that's what got you into college, and you should have used your time in college to cultivate experiences for law school. However, if nothing on your resume appears related to law, I do see the argument for including your high school mock trial award if you won Best Delegate in the world. Just be judicious about including anything from high school. Makes you seem young and relatively unaccomplished, like you're reaching for resume filler. Some tips about this section. Don't refer to yourself as a leader, for example, by having a heading that says leadership experience, unless you held a series of indisputable leadership positions. It can sound arrogant and misguided to say you're a leader because you were the scholarship chair of a service fraternity. Do not title this leadership unless you're going to describe several organizations where you served as president or chair. I've seen too many people call a section leadership and then list being philanthropy chair of their fraternity and a member of their high school's mock trial team. If you joined the Pre-Law Society or Phi Alpha Delta your last year in school, it's obviously resume filler. So state that you participated extensively, perhaps by saying attended weekly events, helped coordinate law school panel events each semester, and actively worked with pre-law advisors and professors to create pre-law programming on campus. Don't assume everyone knows what the Blue Key Society is, but do assume everyone knows what the Golden Key Honor Society is, and please spell it correctly because everybody knows there's a U in there. You do not need to list the entire mission statement of Mortarboard, but should say that only 20 students of the senior class of 8,000 were selected based on scholarship and leadership. Detail your duties, responsibilities, and accomplishments. The point of sharing activities on your resume is to demonstrate your interests and passions and to show that you seriously committed yourself to each. Therefore, stating your duties and accomplishments and the hours you spent devoted to the activity will make your resume more impactful. It's one thing to list member of ABC, and another thing to list member ABC 2015 to 2017, actively involved in recruiting 12 new members in 2015 and 22 in 2016 as a member of the recruiting committee, 2 hours per week. Much more impressive, right? If college was a while ago and you either really don't remember or it would seem trivial in light of more recent accomplishments, simply list your activities like this. In one bullet point, served as executive editor of student newspaper, president of International Students Association, and worked 8 hours a week as a research assistant, and throw it under the education section. Community service. Do not include anything you only did for a day, like showing up for Relay for Life. If you've only done 1 or 2 community service events and/or if your only community service activities have been through a Greek organization, do not have a separate section for these activities. This is an example of looking like you're exaggerating your experiences, and it lessens the credibility of other things on your resume and in your application if law schools suspect exaggeration in one area. This ends up highlighting a weakness, a lack of time spent helping others, rather than making it a positive aspect of your application. For non-traditional applicants, you can list professional organizations, religious organizations, sitting on nonprofit boards, canvassing for elections, and volunteering at your child's school. Dig deep for ideas. Don't assume you have nothing worth including or that non-law related things aren't of interest to schools. Many members of the military volunteer in communities where they're serving, and this is also worth including. You can also use the resume to show you're a well-rounded person. Here are some headers and potential things you could include underneath them. Travel. Seeing the world is a good thing. Showing law schools you've seen the world is a good thing. When can it be a bad thing? When it sounds more like you come from a privileged family and you tagged along with your parent to Tahiti. A volunteer effort, especially for a prolonged period of time, is worth including. If it was in high school, however, I usually take it off a resume unless we're desperate for material. If you took the initiative to plan a cross-country road trip to visit Native American tribes, do share that. Interests. Include anything you consider significant, even if it demonstrates religious or political affiliation. These things add to diversity, and any law school that doesn't want you because of these affiliations isn't the right law school for you anyway. Of course, if the group could be construed as a hate group or other group inappropriate for a future lawyer to be affiliated with, then leave it off the resume. Good examples might include keeping mountain biking or chess or a specific genre of fiction on your resume. You could also use this section to highlight athletic or musical talents, like if you were a junior Olympic swimmer or an accomplished cellist. Consider these as potential interview or cocktail party stories or talking points that make you memorable, likable, and relatable. These are often the things that come up during interviews. Accomplishments. These can include listing the marathons you've run and your finishing times, your belt status for martial arts, your Eagle Scout rank even, any published articles or poems, etc. If you have a series of publications, list them separately under a publications header like you would in a CV, even if it means your resume has a third page. Skills. Think about your language fluencies, musical abilities, computer languages, etc. This section helps to show you're well-rounded in ways that your transcripts, letters of rec, and other application materials may not reflect. Do not include computer skills such as social media and Microsoft Office. These are now simply what I consider to be life skills and not exceptional in any way. If you've been a legal secretary and are trying to show familiarity with billing and calendaring software, leave it off your resume. It won't impress anyone, and it will be understood from your job description that you would be working with these tools. Only include language skills if you would feel comfortable with an admission counselor calling you and speaking to you in that language. Also, don't include fluency in English. I should hope that's a given, even if, or especially if, you're an international student. If you list another language, state how you obtained a level of fluency in that language. Was it spoken in your home? Did you live abroad? Did you study it in high school and college? For how many years? Have you passed a proficiency test in that language? What not to include on your resume. You may have noticed 3 common resume headings missing from my list: summary of qualifications, objectives, and relevant coursework. Only include a summary if you 1. Have been working for more than 5 years in multiple positions, 2. Are trying to pull together experiences that seem unrelated, and 3. If you decide to incorporate this section, it should include concrete statements of fact rather than generalities, such as extensive history of providing excellent customer service. These statements are really only credible when someone else is saying them. On your resume for law school, they feel like fluff. Do not include an objective section, please. Your objective is to get into the law school you're applying to. That's it. Don't state the obvious. It's not necessary to list relevant courses because your transcripts are attached to your application. Besides, nearly all courses are relevant to law school since the law interacts with pretty much everything from engineering to international relations to art. How should you build your resume before applying to law school? A lot of people ask me what they can do to improve their selection of jobs or activities to round out their resumes before they apply. If you still have at least 6 months before applying to law school, make an honest assessment of your experiences now that you've seen them on paper. Do your interests seem all over the map? Are all of your involvements really surface level? Is there anything you can do this year to show growth in an existing interest, such as taking on a bigger role within a group or volunteer effort? Are you lacking real-world experience? Can you take on a part-time job? If you're afraid you don't look like a very serious person, can you become a research assistant or a teaching assistant for a professor that would highlight a sincere academic interest and ability? If you've been working in one non-law related profession for years, is there a volunteer activity you could undertake that would show a clearer affinity for studying and practicing law? Take time for introspection. It's seldom harmful to figure out your interests and gaps. Be proactive about adding depth or breadth to your experiences. However, also keep this in mind. If you only have 6 to 10 months before applying to law school, and you are also going to school or working, then the best use of your time is preparing for the LSAT. Don't sacrifice time on LSAT prep to build your resume. Be sure you can balance both before taking on more at this point. In the print and electronic versions of this book, I have several examples of resumes. One of them is from someone who was a teacher before attending law school. The other is from a more recent college graduate.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them, and feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.